just hanging around the house. So he would go to the swimming pool. I'd go set the pool up.
She never wore makeup, never raised her voice, never stood in the spotlight. But for over a decade, she walked the same halls as Elvis Presley, dusting the chandeliers, folding the linens, and watching the life of the world's biggest star unfold behind closed doors. And now, years after his death, she's finally telling her story. A story that doesn't come with flashing lights or screaming fans, but with quiet truths, buried regrets, and a secret that could change how we see the king forever. She was hired not because of a resume or a glowing recommendation, but because someone at Graceland said she had steady hands and knew how to keep her mouth shut. That's what they needed. Someone who could blend into the background. Someone who wouldn't run to the tabloids the second something strange happened. And strange things happened often. Graceland looked like royalty on the outside. Columns, velvet drapes, a golden gate that tourists now take selfies in front of. But inside, it was something else entirely. The energy inside those walls didn't move like any other house. It shifted with Elvis, his moods, his routines, his needs. If he was up, everyone was up. If he was silent, the whole place fell into a hush. And through all of it, she was there, invisible but always watching. She never called him Elvis. It was always Mr. Presley, or sometimes just Sir. That was the line you didn't cross. He had people around him all the time, a rotating cast of cousins, girlfriends, old friends from Memphis. But they came and went. She stayed. Every morning she was there when he yawned his way into the kitchen, hair tousled, robe hanging open, mumbling about bacon and coffee. Every night, she was there when he'd vanish into the upstairs hallway, sometimes singing to himself, sometimes dead silent. She learned early on not to ask questions. If he wanted to talk, he would. If he didn't, you kept moving. But over time, something changed. He started trusting her in small, quiet ways. First it was asking her to help pick out a shirt for a show. Then it was letting her fold the scarves he wore on stage. Eventually, he let her into spaces no one else went. His private bathroom, his dressing area, the corner of his room where he kept notes, books, and pill bottles. She saw the patterns forming before anyone else admitted something was wrong. She saw how often he took pills without water, how he'd fall asleep mid-sentence, mid-meal, mid-thought, how his eyes, once full of light and mischief, started to look heavier, clouded. She didn't know what it all meant, not then. She told herself maybe he was just tired. Maybe it was the schedule. Maybe it was fame, bearing down like a weight on his chest. He never complained, not in words, but sometimes, late at night, he'd ask if she was still awake, just to talk. Not about music or fame, but about his mother, about God, about whether people really understood who he was underneath all the glitter and gold. Those were the moments she remembered most, because in those moments, he wasn't the king. He was just a man, a lonely, brilliant, crumbling man. The morning of August 16th, 1977, started like many others at Graceland. Restless, uneasy. Elvis had been up all night again. Racquetball, laughter, one more snack, one more story. She'd already started prepping breakfast when she saw him walk in. He looked pale, more so than usual, like the color had drained from his skin. He didn't want food, just water. He barely looked at her, just nodded, and disappeared upstairs. That was the last time she saw him alive. The sound came not long after. Not a crash, not a scream, just a low, dull thud. It came from upstairs, but it wasn't the kind of sound you expect to mean anything. Still, it made her pause. For a second, she stood frozen, one hand on the stove. Then, silence. And so she went back to what she was doing, telling herself it was probably nothing. That's the kind of lie you believe when the truth feels too big to fit in your chest. By early afternoon, something shifted in the air. She couldn't explain it, but it was as if the house itself had gone still. A strange tension clung to the walls. Then the intercom crackled, sharp, nervous, urgent. Without thinking, she dropped everything and rushed upstairs. Her heart pounded. Her legs moved fast, but everything felt slow. As she turned the corner and looked into the bathroom, time stopped. Elvis lay face down on the floor, motionless. There was no pulse in the room, no sound, no movement, just a stillness that swallowed her whole. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, her hands went to work, the way they always had, trained to move when everything else stood still. She found someone, called for help, led the paramedics through the maze of Graceland's halls. But in the chaos that followed, something happened. Someone turned to her, she never said who, and asked her to tidy up the bathroom. Just a little, they said, make it look better. So she did. She wiped the counter, moved a towel, picked up a stray bottle. Nothing major, nothing dramatic, just instinct, just doing her job. Only later did the guilt start to seep in. As reports began to clash and timelines blurred, as rumors swirled about what pills he'd taken and who had been there and what had or hadn't been found, she began to wonder. Had she erased something that mattered? Not out of deception, but out of habit? Had she helped blur the truth? For decades, she said nothing. When reporters came calling, she turned them away. She could have sold her story to tabloids, written a book, gone on television, but she didn't. She stayed quiet. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she didn't know how to say it. Because some truths aren't made for headlines. They're made for whispers. In her final year, though, something inside her shifted. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was the weight of time pressing on her chest. Maybe it was the quiet urge to unburden before it was too late. She started talking, not to strangers, but to people she trusted. She told them about the pills, the erratic sleeping, the unspoken sadness in Elvis's eyes. She described how he once told her he felt like he was fading, not dying, but disappearing, slowly, like a candle running out of wick. And then, one night, sitting in a quiet room with a friend by her side, she said the words that had haunted her for decades. Elvis didn't just die. He was fading, and nobody stopped it. She didn't say it for fame. She didn't say it for pity. She said it because silence had stopped feeling like loyalty, because carrying the truth alone had become it. She remembered something else too, something she never wrote down, not even in the private notes she kept in her drawer. In those first frantic minutes after he was found, someone asked her to make the room look less chaotic. She did it without thinking. Wiped a mirror, folded a towel. It wasn't until later that she asked herself the question that never let her go. Had I helped hide what really happened? Not on purpose. But still, she didn't know. And not knowing, that was the part that broke her. When her confession began to circulate, the world reacted exactly as you'd expect. Some refused to believe it. Others praised her bravery. Many simply wept, imagining Elvis not as a legend, but as a fragile man crumbling in silence. Questions flooded fan forums. Documentarians re-examined timelines. Biographers started making calls. The Presley estate, as always, said nothing. But for those who knew her, those who'd seen her iron his shirts or bring him coffee at 2 a.m., her words hit different. She'd never lied. She'd never exaggerated. She'd never sought attention. If she was saying this now, it was only because she had to. And maybe that's the part people miss when they talk about legacy. It's not just about gold records and jumpsuits. It's about what we leave unsaid, what we hide out of love, what we finally reveal when silence becomes too heavy. She loved him, not because he was Elvis Presley, but because he was a man who once asked her to hem his pants while he hummed gospel songs under his breath, because he was kind to her when others weren't, because he trusted her with things he couldn't say out loud. In the end, she didn't tell her story to hurt him. She told it to honor him, to make sense of the chaos, to bring a little clarity to a moment that never fully made sense. And maybe, just maybe, to remind us that even the brightest stars can burn out in silence, unless someone is brave enough to speak.